Hi everyone, Terry here. Good to see you, and I'm now going to hand over to the wonderful David and Matt to kick us off and talk to us about passwords and multi-factor authentication. Thank you, folks, and bye from me for now.
Cheers, Terry. I will take over. So I'm David Williams from FortiTech. So we are a IT services company with a specialization in security, since that seems to be a very growing industry these days, and certainly the stats aren't looking particularly pleasing. Also have Matthew See from WatchGuard. Say hello, Matt.
Hi, everyone.
So today we're going to talk about passwords and multi-factor authentication. This is a two-part. And last session we talked about starting at the top, making sure that you have the right policies and procedures in place, and doing a scan to give you a good benchmark, and ongoing scans to make sure that you are actually improving your security posture and moving in the right direction. So the idea today is to move on from that and talk about some of the basics. So passwords and multi-factor authentication, this is part one. We will be talking about part two and moving on to that with mobile device protection in May. Both of these are pretty apt with the corona taking over and the world being a bit of a unique position now, with a lot of people working from home and working on cloud-based solutions or through VPNs or RDP. So I guess, why are we here? So at least 7.9 billion records were lost last year, and they do include a large amount of data, highly sensitive personal information, credit cards, medical data, the whole lot. Collection 1 was also released to the dark web for sale last year and contained 773 million unique email addresses and 21 million unique passwords. So the reason why we're here is because losing your password is pretty much the way the world is at the moment. Popular Aussie startup Canva lost 139 million users' details, and these were subsequently put up for sale on the dark web in January this year. And 31% of data breach victims later had their identity stolen. So not only is it prevalent, it happens, but certainly they're being sold, and then they're being used for further hacking and other attempts to get more out of you. So 33% of people use the same password every time. I know I am guilty of this, as pretty much everyone who's watching this probably is as well. A lot of you are sharing that same username and password with a bunch of cloud-based services. And as you can see, an 8-character password has a lot of combinations, but these days with graphics cards and CPUs being stupidly quick, the ability to decrypt those is within seconds or minutes. We'll come to that later on in this presentation, but don't think that an 8-character password is going to protect you from much at all. And if you've got a weak password, like password or 123456, which is the most commonly used password, you are likely to get hacked very quickly indeed. So we're going to go over passwords and what you should be doing, multi-factor authentication to provide an extra layer of security to stop you getting hacked, and password tools, which I think are the best thing since sliced bread and will make this whole process so much easier. So firstly, starting with passwords. So simply don't use the same password everywhere. Have a complex password and use it for each unique logon you have. Longer is definitely better. Simply, the more characters there are in a password, regardless of what they are, the stronger that password's going to be. And password tools allow you to create incredibly long 128 character passwords, and they can be unique and kept in the password tool, allowing you to log in easily to any sort of website or other logon required, and you can store those so you don't have to remember them. This is simply the easiest way to do it, but unique passwords for everything. Do not reuse the same username and password and make them long. The question is how long? So looking at this, the old way of doing it used to be throw in some symbols, throw in some numerals, put a capital in there, and we have something in this one here, the troubadour password, and as you can see, it doesn't take too long to guess at all. And being that dictionary attacks these days are pretty smart, they'll actually go in and make a dictionary of these passwords, like having troubadour and having things spelt like that. so that they make it easier. Also, with collection 1 and the 773 million lost usernames, what they do is they pull out the passwords from those and add them to the dictionary. So if you've tried it before, the chances are, even if it's not your email, if it's someone else's email or you've got another secondary email but using the same password, they will try that password first and foremost to get in there. So going with something like the correct horse battery staple method, which is a very, very long password and something that is reasonably easy to remember, is the best way to do it. I certainly think with your password tool, your master password for that needs to be something along these lines of a very, very long password. Feel free to throw in some numbers and some symbols as well in that, make it a little bit harder, but when it comes down to it, it is purely just the length of that password that makes the difference. So there is a website out there called How Secure Is My Password? I've got a link to that at the end of the presentation, but it's a great way to find out how secure your password really is. And you can punch that in there, press the button, and as you can see with the password, which is obviously the least secure password you could possibly think of, it would be cracked instantly. And if we were to throw in a 128 character password generated by a password tool, you can see that the chances of getting this cracked anytime within our lifetimes is pretty slim. So the difference between the two is just amazingly, 8 characters, which used to be, hey, we'll set a 8-character password, but it doesn't take very long to get in, and a generated one, much, much different. So it's worth looking at your passwords, keeping them as long as you can, and if possible, using the password tool to make them a random 128 characters. Now, moving on to multi-factor authentication. So what is multi-factor authentication? Basically, it's a way of getting another code to provide a third layer, the first two being your username, which is normally your email, the password that you've given it, and then the third being another code that they put in. That code is provided through holding a device, so a physical thing that gives something you know and something you have on your person, like a key. So the old way of doing it with alarm systems was to provide a key for the alarm and a key code. So you put the key in, which is the physical thing you must have, and then you type in the code, which is something you must know. And that was two-factor authentication. With multi-factor, you can then add other layers on top. Like to get into your phone, you need to scan your thumb, which provides a biometric on top of the code that the app gives you, on top of the password that you remember and your username. So that's why they call it multi-factor, more than 2, and that's how you get in. So it just basically provides that extra layer of security. It's a once-off code given to you at the time to get in. So if you do lose your username or password through some third party being breached, it provides something else that basically locks it down. Avoid using any that do use text message. I know there are some providers out there that only use text message, but text messages actually aren't secure. If someone is trying to hack you, and they are standing next to you when you get that text message, they can literally grab that out of the air and see what went through. Or in the case of iPhone users, if they've already breached your iPhone account, they can see all the text messages that come through anyway, and they're one step ahead of you. Some Australian banks such as ANZ do have their own authenticator app, and I know banks such as NAB actually have an entire application that allows them to get in, securing that end to end, which certainly makes a difference. Office 365 has their own Microsoft Authenticator app, as does Google. These apps have their limitations being free apps, but it's certainly better than nothing. And I would urge people to use the Authenticator app from Microsoft over using the text option. Leap itself uses its own mobile app as an authenticator. So if you're using Leap to jump on the cloud, they do have an app and you can authorize that app to be the mobile authenticator. So when you get in, it does its thing. Action Step allows you to use any authentication app through QR codes. And what's a QR code? That's the lovely thing in blue over on the screen over there that we've all seen. And basically these things allow phones that have them to scan that using the camera and automatically set themselves up, which makes things terribly easy and something that is a whole lot more secure using third-party apps. And it means you're using a standardized solution, unlike Office 365 and Microsoft's own thing, which just make it a lot easier to choose something that's a better product than, say, Microsoft Authenticator, which does have its limitations. So I'm going to hand over now for Matt to go into a bit more detail about multi-factor authentication, because this is the game changer when it comes to securing your cloud and other based solutions, and he can go and talk a little bit more about what solutions are out there, what to look for, and why we're looking at them. Over to you, Matt.
All right, thank you, David. Welcome, everyone. My name's Matthew See. I'm the Manager for Sales Engineering in the APAC region for WatchGuard, and I'll be expanding a bit on what David's already covered. A lot of times I'm talking to people about what we see through the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner. And this graph represents the data that was seen up to the 12 months until May 2019. And over 75% of that graph has to do with compromised credentials, mostly by phishing, but also through methods unknown, which is a little bit scary. Like to know how they manage to get those passwords, but they could be data dumps, but also brute force attacks, which is, the least of the problems. And the data for the last 6 months of 2019 shows that things haven't really changed that much. So phishing is still a major threat. There's still credentials getting dumped out there somehow, but basically, again, it's still around 75% of the problem. And I don't expect that that's going to change anytime soon. But the thing is, we're actually now more exposed than ever. So what changed? Well, what we're doing today, COVID-19 has changed everything. So more people are working from home, accessing corporate resources remotely. More resources are up there in the cloud every day. And the more we give people access to these things, it's opening up the network. It's opening up the exposure, okay? By the way, that's not my home office, but I do like the fact that this guy's prepared with the hand wash and toilet rolls there ready to go. So
it's you on the beach, isn't it, Matt?
No, that's not me on the beach, but I'll tell you now, he's cheating. He's got a green screen in his room at home, and that is not really the beach. Okay, so the network footprint is larger. And that's because of opening up things like VPNs for remote work, or doing things like VPNs or doing remote desktop. Okay, so we're giving access to work-based systems from home. And we're also using more of those cloud-based collaboration tools. And we might be using tools that we haven't used before. Like today, I don't really use Zoom, but it's very popular. Now, Zoom have acted on these issues, but there have been exposures. They were caught, sort of a couple of exposures where people could actually manipulate what's happening there. So, we're taking added risk by quickly jumping to tools that we haven't used before, and we simply may not have understood what the threat was. So let's look at how a user might manage all those cloud accounts. So I've got access to dozens of sites in the cloud. And, typically there's one username for each site if it's a corporate site, and that's the email address. So my email address is being used across all of those sites. That's one part of the equation. The last part is the password. Are people using one password for all of those sites? Or are they using a password manager, which is good? It's bad if they're using sticky notes, but don't laugh, it has happened. There was a picture in the press of a guy in Hawaii. In the background of the photo was a sticky note. On the sticky note was the password for the emergency management system in Hawaii. That's a little bit of a problem. Anyway, so also if they're individual sites, how can you monitor a user's access to all of those sites? And plus there's the concept of shadow IT, which is where I might sign up for new sites that are not sanctioned through work, but I'm still using my company account, my username, and possibly the same password. That's a problem. I don't manage the security of those sites. I have no idea how well secure they are. If they get breached, if there's a data dump and my password is exposed, it could be a problem. Plus, when I leave the company, what happens to my access to all those sites? It becomes a problem for the management to actually shut them down. If it's a local account, typically, I can actually find out pretty easily what an email address is. I just have to scan the web, find email addresses. And that tells me, well, I know your company. I know how to connect back to your company network through that if you're connected to the internet. Plus, there are standard formats for usernames. So, good old Fred Nurks there could be shortened to FNurks or NurksF or whatever. So hackers know this too. And that means that they could try connecting back to that company over a VPN or RDP connection, and they'll try a brute force attack where they know your username or they're guessing your username, and they'll just keep hitting up passwords that they think you might be using. So a lot of those common passwords that are exposed through those data dumps. Now, if your network is weak, I could get in, and that's a problem because now your network is exposed. Also, the user's laptop is a concern here. Is that laptop secure? Is it, are they subject to phishing attacks? Could that laptop be compromised? If so, the connection to your network is compromised. And you need to make sure that you're monitoring any access into your company. You want to see who's connecting, when they're connecting, and also, more importantly, when they're failing. That is a very important factor. So what's the risk? Well, the cost of a single compromised account could include a data breach. So loss of corporate data, loss of client data. For lawyers, it's merger and acquisition data. Those sort of things can go through. Insider trading issues. There have been cases in the law courts in Sydney through this sort of stuff. And it could invoke the notifiable data breach laws. So we've seen cases of fraud with fake invoices, payroll theft, super theft, and redirected payments. And there could be loss of reputation, loss of business, or even loss of the business itself, which is incredibly bad. But you have to realize that the entire network itself can be compromised through a single compromised account. So they could have put spyware in there, ransomware. They can traverse across your network and then through VPNs into partner networks. Now, I've taken part in penetration testing of networks where we've actually done this by accident, because you don't really want to do that, but it's entirely possible. And then you've got things like, if your network is compromised, you've got the cost of the investigation, recovery, and or the rebuild. And there's cost of reparations to clients, business partners, and staff, including credit monitoring. And then quite often people start investing in security after the fact, which is a little bit of a problem. So how do we protect ourselves? Well, that's where multi-factor authentication really is one of the best controls that you have. So access to my account, like David said, involves my username, my password, and a token. It could be a hardware-based token on the, it's a little small icon on the left, or it could be my phone, which is the way I do it. In terms of my phone, it's protected by, biometrics. So you need a PIN code to get into my phone, but I can also protect the application itself with a PIN code or biometrics. Inside of the application, I can also protect all the individual tokens. Now that's optional, you don't have to go that far, but it's good security. So now there are multiple factors an attacker needs to get through to defeat my account. And this really is an incredibly valuable thing, because it also works to let me know when someone has my username and password. So if they try to use them, I get an alert on my phone telling me about the access. If it's not me, I can see this, I simply click deny, and I know that I need to go and change my password straight away, because somehow somebody knows it. So MFA, multi-factor authentication, should be used to protect any corporate access, and especially when you're outside the network. And that includes things like, you can apply it to getting into your laptop, accessing a VPN, protecting those remote desktop connections, or protecting access to any of my corporate cloud accounts. So all of those are potential avenues into your network. Now, implemented correctly, MFA can not only protect access, but it makes life a lot easier. So you could use a hardware token. I don't like those. It's something I have to carry. It's for work. I can't use it for anything else. And plus, I hate racing against time to try and enter my username, password, and that token all within a certain time frame, because the token changes every now and then. So I prefer using my phone. And in this case, I'm responding to a push notification. So I can see that my name has come up, my account has come up. So I know which of my accounts, if I have multiple. It tells me what time and date and from where the location originated and what they're trying to access. And then I have a choice to either deny or approve that access. So this is a really, really easy way to use multi-factor authentication. If you look behind the scenes, I actually do have a lot of different accounts that I have linked into my MFA. Now, I never look at those codes. I don't worry about those numbers at all. I simply wait for the push notification to come in, because it makes it clear and easy for me to use. Now, the other good thing about this is I can not only use it for my corporate accounts, but I can use it for personal accounts as well. So the usability for me as a user on my phone is much better. Not only can I use it for work, I can use it for my own personal reasons. And like I said, I don't like carrying hard tokens around. It also makes my life easy, because one thing I can do with multi-factor authentication is utilize single sign-on. So this is how I work. I log into a particular portal every morning. It's all part of our MFA solution. I log in once, I'm using multi-factor authentication to get in there, so it's strong authentication. Once I'm in there, I can click on any of those applications. They're typically cloud-based applications, or I can link back through to work applications where I'm doing RDP or SSH or connecting to a website, all with a single click. So I don't need to identify myself anymore. The single sign-on capabilities through MFA are doing that for me. Now, this is great. It saves me time and effort. Don't have to worry about logging in constantly. And it's very strong security because it's all backed by certificates at the back end, which you certainly as a user don't have to worry about. It just makes life a lot easier. Now, I was wondering, should I bother leaving these slides in, but I quickly threw them in there. MFA is not too scary. There's not a lot of components to it. So for the administrator, ease of use is a significant factor for any MFA solution. So over on the right, you've got your company network and there's some sort of a directory with users. Up in the cloud, there's an MFA identity store. It's just simply a matter of getting some connection into AD, and we do this through gateway software, and that simply relays into the cloud who the usernames are, what the name of that person is, and their email address. So once we get that information into the cloud, the user receives an email, and this simply tells them how to enroll and how to get started, in which case they download the app from their phone. They then take a picture of that QR code, and that's it. They have now set themselves up for multi-factor authentication. So this is a really simple and easy process for the users and for the administrator to get MFA deployed in their network. If we look at what the administrator sees behind there, yes, there's an MFA identity store. So that holds all those users. They define resources, and these are the things that you can access. So a lot of cloud-based resources, or doing things like log-on access to laptops, PCs, RDP servers, and or remote VPNs. And then it's just simply defining user groups that determine what access I get to those resources. So it is actually fairly simple. It's not something to be scared of. MFA is actually quite usable these days. But what we need to look at is, for any solution you're looking at, is it intended for business or consumer use? So business is all about management capabilities and token security. We need to make sure that the tokens can't be cloned, that the tokens are effectively locked to the user's phone. There's no way for somebody to steal that or intercept it. And plus, the tokens themselves can't be intercepted. So as David mentioned, SMS-based tokens can be intercepted. That's a problem. Okay, so for the business, it's all about making sure that the application is correct. And the management side comes into things like ease of deployment and use, user provisioning, validation of those users, auditing and reporting. So there are a lot of capabilities built around the more business-grade solutions. A consumer-graded solution would be something like Google Authenticator. Now, I use Google Authenticator myself. Some apps, that's all they have. But, it's really not designed for business. Other things to consider is how people authenticate. I don't like those time-based one-time passwords. It's too much pressure. I prefer push-based notification. As that picture showed before, it gives me clear indication of what's happening, and it leaves the response to me. I can simply approve or deny, very easy. QR codes, they're mainly used for offline. So if I'm sitting on an airplane and I need to get into something, I don't have access to the internet, I don't have access to the phone networks, I can use a QR code and my phone to get into my laptop. Now, what sort of authentication source are you working with? You can do cloud-based accounts, or you can integrate with Active Directory, Azure, and or LDAP resources. So that's part of the consideration for a company. Very important to look at the integrations that the app will provide. So something like Google is really quite simple, whereas a full MFA solution should be providing you with integration guides. It should integrate into a lot of different things like VPNs and cloud applications, server, laptop security, those sort of things, and actually applications. So I can use my MFA with an in-house application that I've developed. I can still apply it. And we can do this for online and offline access. And we can also do things like safe location bypass, which simply means that when I'm working from home, I need MFA. If I go into my office, I'm in my safe location, no MFA required. So it does make my life easier. Now, in closing, I just thought I'd mention, David doesn't mind, I've had this in here, but a lot of the vendors out there are offering free access to a lot of their tools for up to, in our case, 120 days for up to 250 users. So if you're interested in playing with some multi-factor authentication, have a look out there. A lot of the companies are doing this. They're providing access to their tools free for a certain amount to get us through this crisis. If you are interested in having a look at any of these tools that we have on offer, please get in contact with either myself, there's my email address, or David, and we can absolutely help you with this process.
Thank you very much for that. Hopefully I have come up fine now.
You have.
So as you can see, multi-factor authentication tools have come a long way. They're certainly a lot easier than the hardware-based tokens. I'm not sure I'd want to carry a pocket of 20 of those. These days, I think that almost every app is getting some sort of multi-factor authentication added to it, which is a necessity. And if you look at Microsoft Office 365, I've had a number of clients who have come to us who have had breaches from not having multi-factor authentication there, and they've had accounts either with weak passwords or passwords that have been lost. And we've been able to track that someone's been able to get through there and point out that with multi-factor authentication, we would have been able to have stopped that happening. And it's certainly becoming a lot more prevalent. I know a number of firms, especially in Brisbane in the legal fraternity, who have had issues with this as well and have lost information or had breaches on legal proceedings that were underway, which, as you can imagine, is certainly an impact that a lot of legal firms wouldn't want to go through. But as Matt said, WatchGuard AuthPoint is certainly our favorite tool. It's a business based one that is offered with the necessary levels of security, and it's something that a lot of businesses should look at, and certainly the free one. I mean, for that, give it a try, see how it goes. I find that in my everyday life, just having all the tokens I can in one spot makes it a lot easier than having everyone else's authenticator. That being said, Microsoft Authenticator doesn't currently support it, and they do their own thing. So I know it's on the cards coming up that Microsoft are changing the way they authenticate. So that would be something you'd still need to have. And LastPass does have their own authenticator as well. And the reason I bring it up is they're one of the password tools I'll mention, but they do have a free one that's a good option. So you've got Microsoft, Google, and LastPass as 3 free ones, but they do have their limitations. But this is certainly one of those things where it's better than nothing. Moving on to password tools. So I guess for me, a password management tool is a necessity. I have literally hundreds of passwords, as I imagine most people these days slowly collect them over time, whether they be for a shopping website they log into, their banking, or anything else. It's just part of being a more online-based community. We gather passwords. I think the numbers are something silly like 170 new logons every year are generated on average by each person. So if you think, even if those numbers aren't correct and you're doing only 20 or 30 new accounts each year, that's certainly a lot more passwords to keep. A password management tool just makes remembering those so much, no longer an issue. You can generate 128-bit strong passwords, which easy remembered. The tools allow you to install them on your phones, your laptops, your desktops, put them in the cloud so you can log in from anywhere and be able to get access to those passwords and usernames. And with things like WatchGuard's single sign-on, you can even integrate those so that they're not actually seeing those passwords as well. And with some of the business class password management tools, you can do the same thing where the actual password isn't seen by the user, and you can restrict who has access to it and the ability to lock people out of those once they go with just one simple change, which is a lot easier than trying to change access to, say, 20 or 30 different resources one at a time. Here are 4 password management tools that we think are worth having a look at. LastPass is definitely the most popular and also the only one that actually supports a Windows phone. I'm not sure if anyone remembers those things, but they're still apparently out there. Dashlane is also a great one to look at, and they've come a long way. Keeper is a really good business-orientated one that they do have a great way of sharing passwords between people, and we recommend that for those who are looking for a tool that has those sort of enterprise-level features. And RoboForm as well, which is what I personally use, and it also has a business one, so you can get the levels there. So looking at the other tools, how secure is my password.net? Very good tool just to go and see if your general password you're using now is actually secure and how quickly it'll be cracked. And have I been pawned is definitely one to look at. The amount of people I come across, they don't even realize that they've probably lost their username and password. Putting your data into have I been pawned, it'll tell you whether you have, and it'll tell you what actual place you lost at, whether it was Facebook who lost 64,000 Australian users last year, including a large amount of them and all their data. So if you're looking for people's pictures, birthdays, dogs' names, and anything else that are used for all those security questions, that's probably been sold on the dark web by now as well. So I guess the thing to keep in mind is these are real life scenarios that do happen. It's not something that just may pop up. It is something that is definitely out there and happening. I've dealt with a number of firms this year who have been hacked through, especially now that they're moving out into remote working, through their RDP instances or through their Office 365 or even through their LinkedIn or other social media accounts. It's becoming the norm to be hacked, and a lot of these places, it's becoming the norm to be breached. We've had a number of high-profile Australian businesses that have been breached in the last year, and because of that, the passwords that they may have kept and the usernames that they may have kept have been leaked to the dark web. They're put up for sale there. These things are pretty easy to get. I mean, the dark web isn't as mysterious as it sounds. It is literally just a way that you log into the service using Tor, which is the onion ring. It's a way to make sure that you can't be identified. And then once in there, you get access to all the websites you'd normally have. You just need to, no search engine, you just need to know where to go. So you can type in the dark web's eBay and it literally will bring up a store, and that'll allow you to download lists of usernames and passwords, tools to crack things, exploits once you're in there. There are just so many things, and even literally hacking as a service where you provide a password list to a place, they will provide the tools necessary to hack things, and they will take 20% of the proceeds and pass on the rest. It really is a big business these days, and the tools are really easy to get for hackers out there. So if you're looking for ways to get the first step to secure your business, certainly looking at having the right passwords, switching on multi-factor, and having the right tools there, and having a good password management tool to make sure that that data is collected in the right spot and you aren't using the same password across all 200 of your logons will make a massive difference. The objective here is to make sure that you guys are safe, and that as things move more onto cloud-based services, whether you be using ActionStep or Leap or Office 365 or Google or whatever it is, there is certainly, you really need to be looking at doing those right things, those unique passwords, make sure they're long and complex, make sure you're using multi-factor authentication, and make sure you're using a password tool to make your life easier. You don't have to make this a hard exercise. The objective here is to provide the right tools that make, from a user perspective, simple and easy, cover you from a security perspective, and just allow you to run your business and make things a little bit easier.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you, Matt, as well. Really, really appreciated your time. Fabulous presentation, lots of really fabulous practical stuff there as well. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Thank you for your questions. Don't forget that we have these every month now with David and guests that he brings along as well. It's a really good monthly check-in to see where you're going in terms of your cybersecurity stuff, and ask any of those burning questions as you have today of the folks that are in there doing this stuff every single day. And as David said, if you've got further questions or comments, please don't hesitate to let us know, because we would be more than happy to send those David's way and have him follow up with you. So again, David and Matthew, very, very much appreciated. And to everyone on this session and will be listening to it in the short term, a very happy, peaceful and joyful Easter for all of you. Thanks again, David and Matt.
Cheers, Terry.